I'm Olivia Cross, 32 years old, a corporate lawyer in Chicago. I come from a family that seems to have everything: wealth, success, and influence. My stepfather, Richard, is a former CEO of a tech company, and my mother, Diane, is the kind of woman who knows everyone and everything. Meanwhile, I'm the one who never quite fit in. I was always the bookworm, the one who spent more time buried in legal briefs than at family dinners. And then there's Jared, my husband, so much like my stepfather in ways I didn't want to admit. I always believed our marriage was a refuge from the chaos of my family. But lately, I've started to wonder if it's all just another way for Richard to control me, just like he controls everything and everyone around me. I thought I knew what I was walking into when I married Jared, but nothing could have prepared me for what I would discover about Richard, and what it would cost me. As I stand here, looking at Richard's things scattered across the guest room, I wonder if it's too late to stop the tidal wave that's about to crash down on all of us. Maybe the real question is, how far will I have to go to keep my family and my sanity intact? The door slammed behind me, the sound ringing through the house as Jared and I stepped into our apartment after a 2-week vacation. The fresh air of the city hit my face as I dropped my luggage near the entrance, exhaustion still clinging to my bones. I was glad to be home until I saw it. The guest room door stood ajar. A strange light flickered from within, casting shadows on the hallway floor. My heart skipped a beat. "Jared?" I asked, my voice unusually steady despite the pounding in my chest. "What's going on?" He didn't answer immediately. He dropped his keys into the bowl on the side table, his face momentarily frozen. Then he turned to look at me. "It's fine," he said, his voice clipped. I felt my stomach twist. "What's fine?" I moved toward the guest room, my pulse quickening. The space was unrecognizable. Richard's things, his clothes, his suitcases, were everywhere, neatly arranged as if he had lived here for months. Richard, my stepfather, had used his emergency key to move in while we were away. I took a step forward, but my legs felt like they were made of lead. "Jared, why didn't you tell me?" I whispered. He followed me into the room, standing by the doorframe. "I didn't think it'd be a big deal." "A big deal?" My voice cracked, the disbelief rising. "It's our home, Jared. Why is your father here?" He needed a place. The house flooded. You know that. The words hit me like a slap. A flood? I hadn't heard anything about it before we left. And even if it were true, Richard had options. He always had options. "Jared," I began, my words barely a murmur. "We didn't discuss this. I'm sorry." His tone softened, but the apology felt hollow, distant. There was a tension in the air, thick and suffocating. It wasn't just about the room, or the fact that Richard had overstepped the boundaries of what was supposed to be our home. It was something deeper, something unsettling about how Jared wasn't fighting this, how he was brushing it off as if it was all perfectly normal. I could feel the walls closing in around me. I was suffocating. "This isn't just about a guest room, Jared," I said, taking a step closer to him. "You've let him in. Again." He sighed, his eyes avoiding mine. "Olivia, you're overreacting." I didn't know how to respond to that. I wasn't overreacting. I had a sinking feeling that this wasn't just a harmless visit. This was something else. As if on cue, Richard appeared in the doorway, smiling that perfect, insufferable smile of his. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said, his voice smooth and calculating. I stiffened, my pulse quickening. The last thing I wanted was to face him now. "Richard," I said, trying to steady my voice. "What is this?" He looked around the room, then back at me. "Well, Olivia, I thought I'd make myself comfortable." The words lingered in the air, thick with the unspoken tension between us. "Do you think we're blind?" I finally spat out, my voice rising. "Do you think I can't see what you're doing?" Richard's smile didn't falter. He was always this calm, this composed, as if nothing could shake him. And that's exactly what terrified me. I'm just here to wait out the repairs, dear, he said, his voice smooth as silk. I'm sure you understand. I swallowed hard, trying to control the anger bubbling up inside me. I could feel my hands shaking. You always have a way of making everything seem innocent, don't you? Richard's gaze never left mine. You're just upset, Olivia. Let's not make a scene. He didn't need to say it. The implication was clear. He controlled the situation now, and I was just a visitor in my own home. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just about a room. This was about control. I turned to Jared, searching for something, anything, to suggest he'd stand up for me. But he was silent, his face unreadable. Jared, I said, pleading now. Please, don't let him do this. He finally looked at me, his eyes cold. It's only temporary. I felt the air leave my lungs. Temporary. That word. It didn't feel like temporary. Richard was moving in. And I was losing control of everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my family, and my life. And as I stood there, facing my stepfather and the man I thought I knew, I realized this wasn't going to be a simple argument. It was going to be a war. I was trapped. I just didn't know how deep the lies had gone yet. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Richard smile. The same one he wore whenever he knew he'd won. I kept telling myself that it was temporary, that once his house was fixed, he'd be gone. But deep down, I knew that was a lie. Temporary had never meant temporary for Richard. By morning, the house felt different, like it wasn't mine anymore. Richard had left his mark on every room, even if it was just the smell of his expensive cologne lingering in the air. It was suffocating, a constant reminder that he was here, watching, waiting. Jared, on the other hand, was acting like nothing had changed. He was more withdrawn, his responses short, his movements slower. He didn't see the tension, or worse, he chose to ignore it. It's just a couple of weeks, Liv, he said again that morning over coffee. You're overreacting. Overreacting. I wanted to tell him I wasn't, but I couldn't get the words out. I felt trapped. Trapped by my own marriage, trapped by the silent complicity of the man I loved. He wasn't just letting his father take over our home, he was letting Richard take over him. But I had to act. The longer Richard stayed, the more control he would have. That's how he worked. Slowly, methodically, he wormed his way into every part of your life until you couldn't breathe without his permission. I decided to start looking for answers. I couldn't let this go on without knowing what was really happening. I needed to understand why Jared was so compliant, why Richard's presence felt like an invasion, not a temporary stay. I knew exactly where to look. Richard's office, always locked, always off limits. But today was different. Today I had a key. The hallway was silent as I crept to the door. I could hear Jared downstairs talking to Richard, the low hum of their voices too muffled to make out. I turned the key in the lock with a quick twist, then hesitated before entering. The office was just as I remembered, neat, tidy, almost clinical in its perfection. Everything in its place, as if Richard had designed the room specifically to keep anyone from discovering what lay underneath. But there was something in the air, something about the way the light slanted across the desk that made my skin crawl. I went straight to the filing cabinet. The top drawer was locked, but that wasn't a problem. I'd seen Richard enter the code once when he thought no one was watching. I punched it in, and the drawer slid open with a soft click. What I found inside made my stomach lurch. Contracts, property deeds, legal documents. Everything seemed above board at first. But as I flipped through the papers, a pattern began to emerge. There were names I didn't recognize, corporate entities, business partners, and something that caught my eye, an unsigned will. My breath caught. This wasn't just about Richard staying here. This was something bigger. A will. One that looked like it was waiting to be executed. I pulled it out carefully, unfolding it to scan the details. It was dated, but the signature was missing. A part of me thought about leaving it there, pretending I hadn't found anything. But that thought lasted only a second. I needed to know. I needed to understand what Richard was really after. Just as I started to make out some names in the margins, a shadow fell across the doorway. I snapped the file shut, my heart thudding in my chest. Jared stood there, staring at me with wide eyes. "What are you doing?" His voice was soft, but there was an edge to it, one I hadn't heard before. I was just looking for something," I stammered, my mind racing. "Jared, we need to talk about your father, about what's really going on." He didn't move. His expression was unreadable. "You're overthinking this, Olivia." The words hit me like a slap. Overthinking. That was the excuse, wasn't it? I wasn't overthinking anything. I was seeing clearly for the first time. But Jared didn't see it. I could feel the walls closing in again, just like the night Richard moved in. Only now, the threat wasn't just his presence, it was Jared too. I had no idea who I could trust anymore. "Olivia." Jared's voice broke through my thoughts, and I looked up. He was standing too close now, his eyes cold, his jaw tight. "I told you, it's just temporary." I stepped back, the weight of his words pressing against my chest. "Temporary. You don't get it," I said, my voice tight. "This is more than just your father crashing at our place. Do you realize that?" His gaze hardened, and for a moment I saw something I hadn't before, a flicker of anger. "You're not thinking clearly. You're reading into things." And just like that, I knew. This wasn't just about Richard. It was about Jared too. He was in on it. Whatever was going on, he wasn't innocent. I felt the weight of the truth sink in, a cold, heavy lump in my throat. He wasn't protecting me. He was protecting Richard. I turned away, clutching the file to my chest. "I can't do this, Jared. I can't keep pretending everything's fine. There's something wrong here, and I need to know what it is." "I've had enough of this," he said, his voice low. "You're making things worse." I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could say a word, Richard appeared behind Jared, stepping into the doorway with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Is everything all right here, Olivia?" His voice was syrupy sweet, but I could feel the malice behind it. "Everything's fine," Jared said quickly, almost too quickly. "Just go back to your room. I'll take care of it." But Richard didn't move. He stood there, watching me with a look that made my skin crawl. "You're looking for answers, Olivia, but sometimes some things are better left alone." My stomach turned. The room felt smaller, suffocating. "You don't scare me," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew they weren't true. I was scared. I was terrified. And that fear was only just beginning to take root. The next few days blurred together in a haze of tension. I could feel Richard's presence in every corner of our home. His laughter in the kitchen, his shoes left by the door, his voice carrying through the walls like a creeping fog. Jared was different too. He seemed more distant, his conversations with his father deeper, more intense. And every time I tried to confront him, he pulled away, as if the walls around him were getting higher, brick by brick. "You're imagining things," Jared had said one night when I pressed him about his father's influence. The words were too rehearsed. I had heard them before. They felt like a shield, but it wasn't going to stop me. I had to know what Richard was really doing here. The longer I let him stay, the more I was sure his plan wasn't just about having a place to stay. I was already deep in it, too far in to turn back. I'd done everything I could to be calm, to be understanding. But understanding was getting harder with every passing hour. "I'm your wife, not a doormat," I whispered to myself as I opened the drawer to my desk that night. The file from Richard's office was hidden under a stack of papers. I pulled it out, my hand shaking slightly. Inside, the contract I'd seen earlier stared back at me. The unsigned will. But it wasn't just the will. There were other papers, other documents that made no sense. I flipped through them quickly, skimming the text, trying to make sense of it. Then a name jumped out at me, Clarkson Properties. It was listed as the primary beneficiary of the estate, a real estate group I had never heard of, and certainly one that wasn't registered under Richard's name. The plot thickened. Suddenly, I heard Jared's voice down the hall. My heart raced. I closed the drawer quickly and shoved the papers into the side pocket of my bag. I couldn't let him see. Not yet. But my thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. I froze, glancing at the clock. It was past midnight. Liv. Jared's voice sounded strained, his usual calm replaced with something else. Something sharp. I didn't answer at first, but then I heard him sigh, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. My stomach churned. He knew I was hiding something. I waited until I heard him retreat, then quickly pulled the papers out again. I had to know what this was. There was something off about Richard's connection to Clarkson Properties. I could feel it in my bones. I'd seen that name in the documents from Richard's office before, in connection with business dealings I didn't understand. But this was bigger, and it was closer to home than I ever imagined. I grabbed my phone and dialed an old friend, Nolan, a private investigator I had worked with on cases years ago. He picked up on the third ring. "What's up?" he asked, groggy. "I need a favor," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need to know everything you can about Clarkson Properties. Fast." There was silence on the other end. "Then, I'll get back to you tomorrow." I hung up, my mind racing. I couldn't wait for Nolan. Richard was here now, playing the long game, and I was running out of time. The next morning, I was restless, pacing the house like a caged animal. Richard was already in the kitchen, making coffee. I didn't even know how long he'd been there. He wasn't just in my home, he was in my life. His presence filled the spaces Jared and I had once shared, and now it felt like he owned it all. I walked into the kitchen, forcing a smile. "Morning." Richard didn't look up. "Morning. Sleep well." "About as well as I could," I said, sitting at the counter. "You." He shrugged, as though it wasn't a question worth answering. I could feel the weight of his silence pressing down on me. He was never this relaxed before, this content with his control over everything. He didn't need to be ruthless, he only needed to be subtle. Jared walked in, his eyes still heavy with sleep. He gave me a short nod before grabbing his coffee. He didn't even look at me, not until I spoke again. "I need to talk to you, Jared," I said, the words coming out more forceful than I'd intended. He paused, looking at me for a long moment before sitting down beside me. "What's going on?" "I found something," I said, my voice quieter now. I felt a knot twist in my stomach. "It's about Richard. About Clarkson Properties. There's something wrong, Jared. I need you to trust me." He looked away, the familiar look of conflict on his face. "You're reading into it, Liv. Richard's not." "This isn't about him, Jared." I cut him off, feeling my anger bubbling up. "This is about you, about us. About what's been happening under our noses. I'm not blind." Richard's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "It's all right, Jared. Let her talk." Jared looked at him, then back at me, his eyes flashing with something I couldn't quite place. "Maybe we should listen, Liv. Maybe it's time you knew." I froze. What did he mean by that? But before I could respond, the front door slammed open, a loud thud reverberating through the house. My heart skipped a beat. I turned, but the noise had already made my blood run cold. A man stepped into the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered and carrying a briefcase. His face was familiar, but I couldn't place it. Jared stood up immediately. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice tight. The man didn't answer right away. He only took a few steps forward, dropping the briefcase on the table. "I've been following up on your father's business dealings. We need to talk." I felt my stomach drop. This was it. This was the moment everything changed. "Who are you?" I demanded, standing up. My body was tense, every muscle ready to spring into action. "I'm with Clarkson Properties," the man said, his eyes meeting mine. "And you, Olivia, are in way over your head." I swallowed hard. "What do you want?" "To see how deep this goes," he said, his gaze never leaving mine, "and what you're willing to do to stop it." The blood drained from my face as the truth finally started to sink in. This was just the beginning. The stakes were higher than I'd ever imagined, and I had no idea how much danger I was really in. The air was thick with the kind of silence that suffocates, like it's waiting for something to snap. My hands trembled as I pushed the file deeper into my bag, glancing over my shoulder toward Jared, who stood by the doorway, his back stiff. Richard had already stepped out of the room, but the weight of his presence lingered. "What do you think you're doing, Liv?" Jared's voice cut through the tension, low and tight. "You don't know what you're messing with." I straightened, my mind racing. I had to push forward now. There was no turning back. "I know exactly what I'm doing, Jared. Your father is pulling the strings, and you're letting him. Don't you see it? He's been controlling you, controlling us." His face hardened. "You're wrong." The words were automatic, the kind of defense he had been using for weeks. But there was something off about the way he said it. His gaze flickered to the door, as if making sure Richard wasn't lurking nearby. "Why can't you just see it, Jared?" I pushed, stepping closer. "This isn't just about Richard moving in. This is about your business, about his ties to Clarkson Properties, and the stuff he's been hiding from you. You're letting him bury you in lies." He flinched, but quickly recovered. "I'm not a child, Liv." "No," I shot back, my voice rising. "You're not a child, but you're still playing into his hands like one." There was a long pause. Jared's shoulders slumped, as if the weight of my words had finally sunk in. "What do you want me to say?" he whispered. That was it. That was the crack I'd been looking for. I didn't care about the words anymore. The reality was in front of me. Jared wasn't just passive in all of this. He was complicit. The truth hung heavy in the room, but before I could say anything more, the doorbell rang. I froze. My heart skipped a beat. "Who is that?" I asked, my voice shaky. Jared didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached for his phone. The screen lit up with an incoming call, but he didn't answer it. "It's nothing. I'll get it." But I knew it wasn't nothing. There was something in his eyes, something that told me this wasn't just another call from a client or a friend. "Jared," I began, but he was already halfway to the door. "Wait," I called after him. But he didn't look back. I stood in the hallway, my breath coming fast. This was the moment I had feared. The moment everything would change. A moment I wasn't ready for. Seconds passed. The door opened. I couldn't hear the voice on the other side, but I could see Jared's face, tightening with each word spoken. A knot twisted in my stomach. There was no way this was casual. I moved toward the door, my pulse pounding in my ears. I needed to know who was here. But before I could reach the threshold, I saw the man standing just behind Jared. He was tall, dark-haired, with an air of confidence that made my skin crawl. A briefcase was tucked under his arm. Jared stepped back, clearly unsettled, his hand resting on the doorframe like he wanted to close it but couldn't. "Who is this?" I asked, my voice steady despite the growing panic inside me. Jared hesitated, glancing between the stranger and me. "Olivia," he said softly, "this is Nolan. He's a private investigator." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My mind raced. Why was Nolan here? What had he found? My thoughts spun out of control. I took a step back, my heart hammering. "What does he want?" I asked, but even as I spoke, I knew the answer. Richard. Clarkson Properties. Jared's business. Everything was connected. Nolan extended a hand toward me, his expression unreadable. "I know this is going to sound strange," he said, "but I've been hired to look into some of the things you've uncovered about Richard." I blinked, stunned. "You've been hired? By who?" Jared's eyes flickered nervously, his grip tightening on the doorframe. "It's nothing, Olivia. Just let him in." The tension in the air thickened, almost suffocating. I could feel my throat tightening, the realization hitting me like a freight train. This wasn't just about finding answers anymore. It was about getting pulled into something much bigger, something that had already started spiraling out of control. Richard had manipulated everyone, Jared, me, and now this man, Nolan. I stepped back, my mind struggling to process it all. Why did you wait until now to bring him here? I demanded. Jared remained silent, his gaze dropping to the floor. Nolan took a step forward, his eyes hardening. We can't keep playing games, Olivia. You've dug deep enough. Now you need to decide what you're willing to do with what you find. I didn't know what to say. What could I say? This was the moment I had feared. The truth was too close, too dangerous. Every step I took brought me closer to a line I didn't want to cross. But there was no turning back now. Nolan continued. Richard's been pulling the strings for years. And from what we've uncovered, this thing goes deeper than anyone expected. He's not just running a business. He's running a network. And you're in the middle of it. The words cut through me. I staggered back, my breath catching in my throat. What do you mean? Nolan's eyes flickered, and for the first time, there was a hint of sympathy in them. Richard's not just your stepfather, Olivia. He's been involved in money laundering, arms dealing, and your husband is in on it. The room felt like it was closing in on me. My legs almost gave out, but I caught myself on the doorframe. I wanted to scream to deny it all, but I knew deep down that this was true. Everything was connected. Jared looked up, his face pale. It's not like that, Liv. You have to trust me. But how could I trust him? How could I trust anyone? Nolan stepped forward again, his voice low. Time's running out, Olivia. And if you don't act fast, the whole thing is going to fall apart. Richard's already moving. And he's not going to stop until he's got you exactly where he wants you. My pulse pounded in my ears. I knew what I had to do, but the cost was too high. And then, as if on cue, the phone rang. It was Richard's number. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. Don't answer it, Nolan warned. But I couldn't help myself. My finger hovered over the screen as the phone kept ringing. The truth had already set everything in motion. Now there was no going back. I picked up the phone. The phone slipped from my hand, the screen going dark as Richard's call ended. My body felt numb. The air in the room was thick with unspoken words, and all I could hear was the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. The truth I'd been avoiding had finally shattered everything. Jared's face was pale, his hands shaking. Olivia, he began, but stopped, his voice too soft, like he wasn't sure how to continue. I couldn't breathe. The walls felt like they were closing in. What's going on, Jared? Who is he? I demanded, my voice trembling with the fury I hadn't allowed myself to feel until now. He stepped back, his eyes darting to the door as if he wanted to escape, but couldn't. Olivia, it's not what you think. I could feel the betrayal in his words, taste it like acid on my tongue. Don't lie to me, Jared. You've been lying to me this whole time. I never wanted this for you, Jared whispered. I swear, I didn't know it would get this far. Didn't know what would get this far. I asked, each word heavier than the last. What are you involved in, Jared? What is your father really doing? I'm not just some naive wife. I can see what's going on. His lips pressed into a tight line, and for a moment I thought he might crack. But instead he turned toward the window, his back to me. You don't understand. Richard. He's been manipulating me for years. He promised me security, power, and I believed him. The room felt like it was spinning, my mind struggling to process the pieces falling into place. I had always known there was something about Richard's presence that felt wrong, but I never imagined Jared would be part of it. So this whole time, you've been a part of it. Jared's shoulders slumped. I never meant for you to get caught up in this, but it's too late now. There's no going back. I stared at him, the man I thought I knew, the man I had trusted. His words felt like ice, seeping into the cracks of everything I had believed. I don't believe you, I said, my voice cold. This isn't just about you and your father. This is about us. Olivia, please, Jared said, turning back toward me. I didn't want this. But Richard has me in a position where I can't walk away. He's too powerful. He knows too much. And he's got leverage over everything. Leverage. I repeated, a sick feeling crawling up my spine. What leverage? The silence stretched out like an eternity. Then, in the quietest whisper, Jared spoke. Your family. He's been digging into your background, into your mother's finances, everything. He's been blackmailing me, threatening to expose everything if I don't help him. I didn't have a choice. I stood there, paralyzed by the words. The room felt like it was suffocating me. I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, to make him understand that I didn't care about money or threats. But all I could do was stare at him, horrified. He's going to ruin everything, Olivia, Jared said, his voice barely a whisper. And you'll be the one to suffer the most. I took a step back, the ground beneath me feeling like it was slipping away. This isn't just about me, Jared. This is about you too. You let him control you, let him use you. You're just as much a part of this mess as he is. Jared's expression hardened, his jaw clenched. You don't understand. I don't have a choice anymore. I shook my head, tears threatening to spill over. You always had a choice, Jared. But you chose him. You chose this. A knock on the door interrupted our silence, and I froze. Someone else was here. Another part of the web Richard had spun around us. Jared's face paled, and he rushed to the door, glancing at me one last time before opening it. Standing in the doorway was Nolan, the private investigator, with a man I didn't recognize. His face was obscured by a baseball cap, and he carried a small duffel bag, his posture stiff. Olivia, Nolan said, stepping inside. His eyes flickered to Jared, then back to me. It's time we move forward. We can't wait any longer. I looked at Nolan, confused, my mind still reeling from everything Jared had just confessed. What's going on? I demanded. Nolan didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked toward the kitchen, his eyes scanning the room. The man behind him stepped forward, dropping the duffel bag onto the table with a thud. Olivia, Nolan said, turning toward me, his tone urgent. This has gone far enough. Richard has people everywhere, and he's already made his move. If we don't act now, it's all over. Act how? I asked, the fear in my chest tightening. What's happening? Nolan gave a quick nod to the man with the duffel bag. The man opened it slowly, revealing stacks of documents, files, and a flash drive. This is everything, Nolan said, his voice low, serious. Everything Richard's been hiding. His entire operation. The money laundering, the deals, the blackmail. All of it. I stared at the documents, in disbelief. What do you want me to do with this? This is your way out, Nolan said, his voice harder now. You need to take this to the authorities. You need to expose him before he can do more damage. If you don't, he'll bury you and everyone else under his control. The weight of the decision pressed on me, suffocating. I had no choice but to face it, to step into the unknown and risk everything. The choice wasn't just about Jared or about me. It was about stopping Richard before he destroyed any more lives. I can't do it alone, I said, my voice trembling. I need your help. Nolan nodded, a dark glimmer of determination in his eyes. We're all in this together, Olivia. You're not alone anymore. But as I looked back at Jared, standing silently by the door, I knew the truth. The man I thought I knew, the man I had loved, was no longer the person standing in front of me. And the storm was about to break wide open. I woke to the sound of silence. The house was still. The chaos that had taken over the past weeks, Richard's manipulation, Jared's lies, felt like a distant memory, but the weight of it was still pressing down on me. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone. The past few hours had been a blur. Nolan had helped me gather the files, the damning evidence against Richard and his empire, but I knew it wasn't enough. This wasn't just about taking him down. It was about what came after. I had to make a choice. The truth always comes at a price. But at what point does the truth become too costly? I had spent years being patient, playing the wife who made excuses, who didn't ask the right questions. I had been complicit in my own silence. But now, there was no more hiding, no more pretending. This was war. Richard had no boundaries, no conscience, and neither did Jared. But they underestimated me. My fingers hovered over the phone screen as I dialed the number for the district attorney's office. I took a deep breath. I need to report a crime. The call was brief, but the impact of what I had just set in motion wasn't. I was no longer just a wife caught in the crossfire. I was now a whistleblower. And the people who had protected Richard, his network of power, money, and manipulation, were now going to be held accountable. It felt liberating and terrifying. The decision was made. I would stand against everything they built, against everything Richard thought he could control. Later that day, Nolan arrived with a new set of information. This wasn't just about money laundering anymore. The scope of Richard's operation reached much further than I had imagined. Arms deals, corporate espionage, and worse. Jared's name had been on documents linking him to everything. Richard had used his son as a pawn in a game he never wanted to play. And now Jared was paying the price. "Olivia," Nolan said, his voice serious, "there's no turning back now. You need to prepare yourself. Once we file this, there's no going back. Richard will do everything he can to destroy you. He'll drag your name through the mud. Use everything he's got. He's already making moves. I wouldn't be surprised if you're being watched." I felt the gravity of his words. The stakes were higher than I had ever imagined. My heart raced, but I couldn't afford fear. Fear meant failure. I met Jared's eyes later that night. His guilt was written on his face, but it wasn't enough. "I don't know what to do anymore, Liv," he admitted, his voice strained. I leaned forward, looking into the man I once loved. "You could start by helping me. Help me stop your father. Help me bring him down." Jared's eyes flickered with doubt, but he nodded. It wasn't a promise. It was a resignation. The next few days were a blur of activity. Nolan arranged the meeting with the authorities. The documents were secured. We were all ready to expose Richard for what he was. But as I walked into the district attorney's office, I felt the weight of the decision sink deeper into my bones. This wasn't just about family anymore. This was about survival. "Olivia," the DA said, motioning me to sit across from him. "You realize what you're doing, right? This is going to tear apart everything. You, your family, your entire life." I nodded, my voice steady. "I know, but the truth is more important." The DA's eyes softened. "You're brave." Brave. I wasn't sure about that, but I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of Richard, not of Jared, not even of myself. This was the only way forward. I left the DA's office with the weight of the world on my shoulders, but also a strange sense of relief. The papers were filed. Richard's empire would crumble, but there was no victory without a cost. Jared would never be the same. He'd made his choices, and now he would face the consequences. I didn't know what would happen to us, if anything, after all of this was over. But I knew one thing for sure. The only way to survive was to let go of the past. I returned home that evening, knowing that everything would change. The moment I walked through the door, I realized something. There was no going back. Richard wouldn't stop until he had destroyed everything I held dear. But I had already taken the first step. My phone buzzed. A text from Nolan, "They're coming for you." I exhaled, steeling myself. "Then let them come," I whispered to myself. Because there was no more running. This was the final confrontation. The final twist. The last breath before everything would either fall apart or be rebuilt. The truth would break us all. But sometimes the only way to heal is to break everything apart first. The lights in the house flickered, casting long shadows against the walls. I didn't know if I was ready for what came next, but I was ready to fight.